You'll notice I skipped over a couple slides because that was of a table summarizing the many digestive activities of your stomach. But I want to move on. I want to move on to the pancreas, the liver, and gallbladder. So, as far as stomach contents are concerned, we're now in the small intestine. This cadaver image has the stomach removed and part of the liver has been removed. But that has been done to reveal the pancreas, which is located behind the stomach. Still have a lot of the liver in place. The gallbladder, located inferior to the right lobe of the liver. And then the duodenum. So if we're traveling with the food, we're in here. We're in that first region of the small intestine, the duodenum. Located very close to the duodenum is the pancreas. And your pancreas has a couple regions to it. This area here is often referred to as the head of the pancreas. This is the body of the pancreas. And then over here on the left side is the tail of the pancreas. We see a little view of the spleen. The diaphragm is in place. A lot of adipose tissue, visceral adipose tissue of the intestines. But let's talk about what this pancreas is going to do. Notice there's some big ducts in it. Pancreas is largely exocrine tissue. The exocrine tissue of the pancreas is going to produce a lot of things that are going to be delivered into the duodenum. And collectively, we call that pancreatic juice. But don't forget that a small portion of the pancreas is responsible for regulating your blood sugar with insulin and glucagon. But we're going to talk about what the majority of the pancreas tissue is doing, which is producing digestive enzymes and bicarbonate. So in this pancreas, there are cells actively producing enzymes and bicarbonate in response to those two hormones, cholecystokinin and secretin. So in that pancreatic secretion, there's going to be sodium bicarbonate. So this is going to act as a buffer. So recall that the chyme that enters the duodenum is going to be highly acidic from the stomach acid. So sodium bicarbonate is secreted in to neutralize that stomach acid. The enzymes that are produced by the pancreas include a pancreatic amylase that's going to continue the carbohydrate digestion, 4 proteases. So these are all proteases. They're going to digest protein. Trypsin, chymotrypsin, elastase, and carbopeptidase or carboxypeptidase. So these all digest protein just slightly different. They have different ways to recognize the protein, but they are going to cleave or cut peptide bonds in between the amino acids. It's going to add in another lipase, pancreatic lipase. And this is actually our most effective pancreatic lipase. So we're really going to be able to digest triglycerides. And then there's a couple other enzymes. These enzymes digest nucleic acids, RNA and DNA. So ribonuclease and deoxyribonuclease. Now typically RNA and DNA are not nutrients. We don't consider them nutrients. You don't have to get them in your diet because the body can make them on its own. But they're there. They're in the foods we eat. They're in our plants that we eat, our vegetables, our fruits. They're in the animal products we eat. So the body has built a way to digest RNA and DNA and use those digested end products. So those are all the different components found in pancreatic juice being delivered to the duodenum by these ducts. The pancreatic duct, and then there's often another duct in the head of the pancreas called the accessory duct. What is the liver going to do? Well, the liver is going to produce bile. That's a major function of the liver. We're going to talk more about bile when we get to the gallbladder as well. But bile is a mixture of things that serves two major purposes. One, it's going to help us deal with fats in our diet. So it's going to help to emulsify the fat in our diet. Emulsification is kind of separating out the fat into smaller, more manageable um, components instead of letting that fat kind of clump together. So it helps us deal with our fats. It also is a way to get rid of bilirubin. If you remember, we've got that bilirubin coming from our worn out red blood cells from the heme. So we have to have a way to get rid of that bilirubin. So it is excreted from the body by putting it in bile. Other functions of the liver aren't necessarily occurring at this point in time where we're food in the duodenum. But if you remember, after absorption, blood goes to the liver, right? Blood from the GI tract goes to the liver. So a lot of these other functions are happening after you absorb your nutrients. We haven't quite gotten to that point yet. But your liver can store glucose in the form of glycogen. So when we eventually get to the point where we absorb glucose from our carbohydrates, it's going to go to the liver by the hepatic portal vein. The excessive amounts of that glucose is going to be stored as glycogen. We use our liver to synthesize cholesterol and other lipids in the form of lipoproteins. So the liver makes cholesterol, the liver makes and ships out other lipids in what we call lipoproteins. Lipoproteins are a combination of a lipid, cholesterol, triglycerides, and protein. The protein helps us transport those lipids in our bloodstream. You may have heard of LDL before. LDL is cholesterol packaged with proteins being shipped out from the liver throughout the body. We typically call LDL bad cholesterol because it's leaving the liver and being sent throughout the body. So if your LDL is high, that might mean you might have high cholesterol circulating out of the liver. HDL is actually good cholesterol. That's the cholesterol going to the liver for processing. So we typically have two different cholesterols we look at, the LDL and the HDL. LDL is going out of the liver, HDL is going to the liver. VLDL, which stands for very low density lipoprotein, is how we transport triglycerides out from the liver. Another function is to remove the amino group from amino acids coming from our diet. So every amino acid has what's called the amino group. And in order to use that amino acid for metabolism, the liver has to remove the amino group. As a result, that amino is ammonia. So when you remove an amino group, it becomes ammonia. And that's a very highly toxic molecule. So it has to be detoxified into a less toxic molecule called urea. And then eventually urea gets eliminated from the body in urine. But that's a metabolic waste product from protein metabolism. It detoxifies, so it can detoxify a lot of different things that might be coming from our diet. In the foods we eat, but also medications can be detoxified and metabolized by the liver. It can also store things. Your liver can store vitamins and minerals. The vitamins include vitamin A, D, K, and B12. Some of the minerals it can store are iron and copper. And then finally, the liver produces a lot of proteins that travel in your bloodstream, collectively called plasma proteins. Albumin being the most abundant plasma protein, but also a number of our clotting factors are produced by the liver. So a lot of functions of the liver. Not all of these directly related to digestion. In fact, the liver doesn't make any digestive enzymes. It just helps to process some of those nutrients after they've been absorbed. The gallbladder. The gallbladder is pretty simple. It's a bladder. It stores something, and it just happens to be the storage organ for bile. So bile is not made by the gallbladder. It's produced by your liver, but it can be stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. Therefore, the liver is, much more important in the world of, a living human. You can't live without a liver, but you can live without a gallbladder because you can still make bile if you don't have a gallbladder. What is in bile? Water, bile salts, cholesterol, lecithin, some pigments like bilirubin and other metabolites, and then some ions. It's, again, serves two major roles. One is it's an excretory material that contains bilirubin. We can get rid of the bilirubin. And then the bile salts are responsible mostly for that emulsification of lipids. So dispersing the lipids out to be easier to digest. This is a drawing showing these organs and their relationship to one another. You'll notice a number of ducts drawn in here. The green ducts are transporting bile. The purple ducts are transporting pancreatic juice. So you'll notice the liver is going to be producing bile, transporting it out of the liver in what's called hepatic ducts. Those hepatic ducts eventually bring the bile into the gallbladder via a duct called the cystic duct. Then, when bile is needed, bile can come out of the gallbladder and back out the cystic duct. It'll also come down from the liver, and now it can travel all the way down to the duodenum in what's known as the common bile duct. So a lot of ducts all involved in transporting bile either into the gallbladder for storage or out of the gallbladder and down from the liver to be delivered to the duodenum. The pancreas, you'll notice there's two major ducts here, the pancreatic duct and the accessory duct. Notice the pancreatic duct actually merges together with the common bile duct. And what it does is it forms a widened duct called the hepatopancreatic ampulla. And that's just this little wide spot there. Surrounding this is where you find that sphincter. So that sphincter determines whether all this material is going to enter the small intestine or not. It all depends. If you have food in your small intestine, you need to deliver this stuff in. But if you don't have food and material in the small intestine, this little sphincter can close up and that bile will kind of back up into the gallbladder. So just opening and closing of that sphincter determines whether bile goes into the duodenum or gets stored in the gallbladder. So this is a good scheme over here of the transport of bile. Produced in the liver, delivered to the duodenum. Unless you don't need it there, then the sphincter closes and the bile gets forced by basically just a little pressure because of closing of the sphincter. That bile can go back up into this gallbladder and be stored. So a lot of little tubes, a lot of little ducts transporting these secretions, either pancreatic juice from the pancreas or bile from the liver via the gallbladder. Next video we'll look now at the small intestine and its anatomy and function.